With that, let us begin. We have something very special for you all. We're going to begin with a panel discussion. I'm going to invite our panelists up one at a time and then introduce you to our moderator. The discussion of our panel is to threat-inform your organization. So from the leadership view, how can we apply a threat-informed defense? Let me invite up first, Derek Manky. Derek Manky leads FortiGuard Labs' Global Threat Intelligence team at Fortinet. In this role, he also orchestrates global threat intelligence partnerships. Our second panelist, David West. At the National Australia Bank, David West leads the cyber threat management team, where he's responsible for threat intelligence, adversary mitigation, and remediation. David also spearheads NAB's approach to threat-informed defense. Our third panelist, who traveled quite a distance, Mark Wee leads Citi's Asia Pacific Red Team. A local favorite. Mark focuses on adversary emulation and advances R&D, including threat-informed defense. He's experienced in incident response, security consulting, and intelligence in the public and private sector. Once more for our panelists. And now our moderator. So you all, our moderator is the individual who has planted the seed for threat-informed defense in the Asia-Pacific region and in the world. It is because of all of you that that seed is, you're the soil, you're the water, you're the reason threat-informed defense flourishes, but that original seed is our moderator, the director of the Center for Threat-Informed Defense, my dear friend, John Baker.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Sunil. It is amazing to be back here again for a second year. It's awesome to see some of the people returning from last year and new faces. So in the spirit of trying to build community and kind of unite the community to advance threat-informed defense globally, I think we have a really unique opportunity today. We have Derek, David, and Mark here with us. They're all thought leaders and represent organizations that are kind of far along in this journey of embracing and adopting threat-informed defense within this organization. Since the very beginning, I've thought of threat-informed defense as kind of a journey. I was talking to Derek as a little sidebar this morning, kind of recognizing that a lot of people are doing aspects of threat-informed defense and maybe don't even realize it. People hit barriers, and those barriers might be technical, they might be organizational in nature. So today, bringing the three of them together, I think we have an opportunity to kind of learn from their experiences, their perspectives, and hopefully help set a tone for the rest of the day, but also leave you all with some thoughts and guidance on how to advance threat-informed defense in your organization. So as we get started, Mark, do you want to say a little bit more about yourself and kind of how you got started in cybersecurity?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark. So I've been with Citi for about, I don't know, close to 7 years now. And I've seen the firm start on its threat-informed defense journey, right? So a little bit about myself. So I got into cybersecurity a long time ago, maybe say 16 years, and I've seen a lot of things change. But I do think in the last 6-7 years being in Citi itself, we have really accelerated the changes by focusing on threat-informed defense. We'll go into a little bit more detail, I think, as the panel progresses. But the last 6 or 7 years have been probably the most exciting time.
Excellent. Thanks, Mark. David, do you want to say a little bit more about your role and how you got started in cybersecurity?
Yeah, hey everyone. Thanks, John. Great to be here again this year. I was here last year and it was a fantastic conference. So looking forward to the rest of the day. So I head up cyber threat management at National Australia Bank. NAB are one of the big 4 banks in Australia, and we are Australia's largest business bank. I've been at NAB for quite a while now, about 12 years, and in security for about 20 years now, which used to be called security. Now it's cyber security. It's been around for a little while. And I got into security doing technology roles and was doing a network operations role. And I remember I was managing firewalls and I saw, a spike in network traffic, which was someone basically port scanning our firewall, about 15 years ago. Ended up being a customer, I was working for a bank, ended up being another customer that we were doing business with or looking to do business with. And they were probing our perimeter, scanning our attack surface back then. And that got a lot of interest with our business. And for me, that just sparked just a fascination with the security aspect of technology. And I haven't looked back. Love it.
Excellent. Well, it's awesome to have you back here this year. And Derek, do you want to introduce yourself and say a little bit about your role and how you got started in cyber?
Sure. And this is actually my first time at this conference, so I'm really excited to be here because we're talking about practical things that matter, not pie in the sky type stuff, right? So it's great. My role, I'm Global VP of Threat Intel, so I lead our Threat Intel team at Fortinet. I've been almost 21 years at Fortinet. I started in 2004. And I got into cybersecurity before then. I got a kid, as a kid, I got a computer from my parents in the 80s, started playing around with dial-up modems, ran bulletin board systems. I got into forums, and there was even back then hacking posts. And I thought, hey, this is cool. Curiosity, right? I didn't kill the cat. It got me interested into cybersecurity. I started playing around with debuggers and said, hey, I can actually change the output of process flow in a program. That's pretty cool. So I started tinkering around and took comp sci and did some basic stuff on firewalls and networking and code development. And then I got a call in 2004. Hey, Derek, from a classmate of mine, there's this company called Fortinet. Do you want to sign up? I said, sure. Didn't hear about it. It was a small company at the time, less than 200 employees. Now we're 14,000. Here we are 21 years later, right? I started my life as a malware analyst. Then I kind of branched out thinking, there's much more we can do with threat intelligence. And so for the last 15 years, I've also been driving our public and private partnerships, which of course includes MITRE and the CTID. Yeah.
Excellent, Derek. Thank you. Derek, David, and Mark all represent Center for Threat Informed Defense members. And as I think about that journey, I see, those member organizations is like towards the far right-hand side of that timeline. Not just sort of starting to implement internal capabilities, but working together, as Sunil said, advancing research in threat-informed defense through collaborative R&D. So I thought I would start with just the sort of the why. As you think about your experience in threat-informed defense, I'll go with you first, maybe Mark. Can you talk a little bit about the impact that threat-informed defense has had within your organization and how it sort of supports your cybersecurity strategy?
Right. Thanks, John. So, let me talk about the impact of how threat-informed defense has really shaped the way we do things in Citi, right? The biggest takeaway I have is Citi being a big organization. I think we're in slightly over 100 different countries itself, and keeping an estate this huge is quite challenging, right? One of the biggest takeaways we've had so far is the reduction in the overhead. So if you think about it, Citi's operations, the whole cyber operations itself, was spanning three major different regions, and out of all of that itself, the collaboration across the different operational teams itself, each of them have their own respective frameworks, with threat-informed defense being threat-informed defense being used as a method of prioritization and overhead reduction. We've seen the biggest gains in that space. On top of that, try to keep up with everything that changes itself, having partnerships with MITRE and some of our other members in the center itself have also significantly driven up our the firm's ability to generate new IP to address these evolving threats.
That's amazing, Mark. I think people kind of forget how important it is to have something like attack as this sort of foundational language that allows you to have collaboration and focus on specific threats, how you mitigate those threats. And that really is the core of threat-informed defense. David, sort of same question. Can you talk a little bit about how threat-informed defense supports NAB's cyber strategy?
I think I'd echo Mark's first point, which is it's about prioritization. So no matter what size organization you run, if you run a 100 and 200,000 person organization across 100 countries, or a 40 or 50,000 person organization, or even a 40 person small business, It's about prioritizing your scarce resources on the right things, and those things that are most likely, from our perspective, it's thinking about, well, what are the things that are going to impact us from a threat or a risk perspective, and we think threat-informed defense is the way to think about that and approach that. We've got a threat and data-led strategy, and you'll hear that across, a lot of organizations. We're data-led. Well, what does that mean? How do you bring that to life? It is using, the guys here will talk about the definition, but it's using the adversary as the lens in which we look at our defenses and prioritize our scarce resources again. And for us, that means it's prioritization. It's also a way we communicate cyber threat and risk, such that we talk, our investment prioritization, we can trace that back to threat. And when we're talking to our senior executives or our CISOs talking to the board, they're talking in terms of risk exposures that are traceable right the way back to the threat, and the work that our teams do to understand that and to get in front of it.
Derek?
So I usually have an 80 slide presentation on this, but we don't have time for that. So look, like we're a cybersecurity vendor. So it very much applies in like a multifaceted approach, I would say. 100% prioritization, that is the sphere of threat-informed defense. What does that mean to Fortinet? Many things. First of all, so TID applies both internally to our own InfoSec team, our SOC team, our PCERT, our product security team as well too. But even externally through services, we have consulting through incident response readiness, tabletop, C-suite tabletop exercises. All of those have touch points where we're doing threat-informed defense, we're doing MITRE messaging, we have demo environments set up. From an internal perspective, if we look at product resilience, right, we've built something called outbreak alerts. And this actually helped to solve a lot of issues we had, because when I think we started these in around 2016, 2017. Last year, we issued over 60 of these. So any sort of big campaign we see going on, whether it's, it could be a Log4j, it could be any one of those big ones where you see high prevalence, we map that into our product solution stack, right? So we'll have an outbreak alert and we'll say, okay, on the endpoint, here's our detection capacity. On the network, like NDR, here's our protection capacity. Is there a cloud native, function for this and so forth? So you'll have a list across the attack surface into what products are supporting that. When we take that, we're actually making sure that we run through that attack, that we are supporting that. We have packs that we put into virtualized environments, like deception environments, where we can replay the attack and make sure that we're actually detecting everything. So it becomes a gap analysis, and that's TID, of course. Purple teaming, doing the detection engineering, making sure that if there is a new defensive evasion tactic, that we are catching it. And if we're not, then obviously we implement that. So from a product resilience standpoint, it's really important. But on the communication and training, that's also a big thing for our sales force, right? I mean, we're a vendor. We have too many products. We have over 57, I think. And we can't, our CEO would love it, but we can't just say sell everything, right? That's not prioritization. Like what is really important to you based off of this threat? And that's where we have those demo environments set up. We actually do workshops internally for sales on this. And then we're also looking at it from a threat intel perspective also. So EASM, external attack surface management. Gartner now has come up with CTEM, continual threat exposure management, which is threat-informed defense in my point of view, because it's AEV, adversarial exposure validation, and EAP. That's purple teaming essentially, right? So they have another word for it, but to me, that's threat-informed
I'm learning some new acronyms though. I didn't know half of those.
Yeah.
And, Derek, to your point, actually, we're looking at putting together with one of our center members sort of a guidebook that shows how threat-informed defense fits together with continuous, I'm drawing a blank on the acronym at the moment.
but it's
exposure management.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, again, sort of what you're talking about before in our sidebar conversation. When they come out with something like that, it's not just this brand new idea to me, right? It's like some people are already doing this, but they don't know it. Yeah. So
It's cool. it's called something different.
Yes,
But
exactly.
what I like about the work that we're doing here with the center is we are defining, I guess, new standards, new nomenclature that hopefully aren't unique to a small community in 5-10 years' time, but they are the way that we think more broadly globally around how most organizations do cybersecurity.
So I think, one of the themes we're starting to hear is, for me, a lot of the whole reason why we got started with the Center for Threat Informed Defense and Threat Informed Defense, it wasn't about let's do threat informed defense or let's do attack. It was how do we get together and figure out how to make cyber defense much more efficient and more effective, right? And so that's those themes of prioritization, improved communication, improved collaboration. It's that whole spirit of working together to drive to efficiency and effectiveness. So it's not an easy journey. I said it's a journey. You obviously hit roadblocks along the way. You got to get your stakeholders and internal buy-in for really investing in prioritizing threat-informed defense. Maybe I'll start with you again, Mark. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you faced as Citi's been working through this journey?
Right. Thanks, John. So I'm just going to touch on 4 points on the challenges we've faced over the years and how we've kind of in a nutshell addressed this, right? So the first is basically enterprise adoption. I think it starts there. If you're the only person in the enterprise using it, it's not really going to go anywhere. That has been my own experience at the start of the whole threat-informed defense journey, and how we actually look to address it. I won't call it a resolution, but it's getting stakeholder buy-in. So I actually went around talking to different people and saying, hey, I've got this brand new idea, and I kind of I need you to take a look at it and see what that means to you. Right? Is that going to be useful to you in some way, form, shape, or manner, right? And those were recurring discussions that went on for in some cases years, right, to try and get folks warmed up to it now for a variety of reasons. And part of it is as well is there are established methodologies within respective operational teams, right? That folks, just generally sometimes they don't feel comfortable shifting to something new that hasn't been tested. So if you look at things like the Lockheed Martin CyberQ chain, folks who are familiar with incident response would use the diamond model, so on and so forth. Each of these have their own established processes. It's been tried and tested. No one's going to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to chuck that aside and just kind of go on this wild journey where we don't know what it's going to look like. So getting stakeholder buy-in, and to that note itself, trying to find areas of commonality have helped drive these discussions ahead. And as you get small success cases with baby steps, or what they call it, right? You start building upon all of that, right? So the other ones that we have also found to be quite challenging at the analyst level, it's the learning curve. So I remember at the start itself, right? I was talking to different people, not necessarily within Citi, but folks who used to use the MITRE ATT&CK matrix as the coloring book. Everyone that I spoke to wanted to turn it green, right? And so those of you who have tried, you would come to the conclusion quickly that it's not feasible. And it starts opening up discussion points where you think about how do you actually approach this, right? What does risk mean to your organization? What does a rate on the spreadsheet actually mean, right? And all of that, getting the right folks involved at the analyst level, getting buy-in at the executive level, having that alignment has really helped us address a lot of this adoption challenges.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. Derek, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges you faced and how you've overcome them?
Yeah. So a couple. I hinted on it earlier. So first of all, enterprise adoption. I think that to me that's number one for sure, and you'll probably see that across the boards, especially when you get bigger and bigger workforces. As I said, we have a lot of products, and each product obviously has a product management team. And for us, when it comes to training, we have to be able to explain to each product manager why this is important, right? Not only that, but to also to be on board with us and implement the projects. Is remember in the center, it's not just this concept of threat-informed defense. Like we have, if you see the impact report, all these great projects that we've contributed to, other members have contributed to, and we want to adopt that. right? So some examples of things we have adopted are the sightings ecosystem, which is TTP-based heat maps and telemetry reporting. We have that on our sandbox, on our EDR, on our NDR endpoint. So that, that takes some time to ramp up and do that on a project by project basis, to have that obviously continually learning, to be updated on all the new projects that we have. It's a challenge. And, Doug and Amaro are on my team here. They've been doing great jobs, but we're still limited resources, and you really need to get people on board for that. So that it's been a learning experience. We've had measures of success with that. But then, the other piece is the continued stakeholder support. I agree with that as well. It's the same thing. We're lucky, we have a CEO who's cybersecurity conscious, who's an engineer, so that helps. But still, when it comes to the board, this is an investment, right, of time and resources like anything. And what's the so what? How do you tie that in? And as I mentioned, we're starting to do that now, because it does tie into business for us. It does tie into, as I said, CTEM and all these other things. So it has been a challenge, though, across a 10,000 plus workforce to do that and have continuous training along that.
David, how have you, what are the challenges you faced, and how have you been able to address them so far? And it might still be a work in progress, right?
It's always a work in progress. And I love that Derek, coming from the vendor space, is talking about picking up the products and the tools that the center is developing and starting to use them to standardize. I think we need to do that more, holistically across the other vendors and across how we do cybersecurity more broadly. And things like, whether it's TTP heat maps and even something simple like, structuring threat intelligence using MITRE ATT&CK consistently every time, so analysts don't need to go and do that manually, or using flow visualization, the tool that the center's developed to communicate and visualize what an attack path looks like. All of these are things that we need to standardize as an industry. But the challenges for us, I think, probably similar to others, is just knowing where to start and what to do first and what to do next. And that's why one of the projects that we've been working with the center on this year is M3 TID, which is measuring, maximizing, maturing threat-informed defense. And we think that's foundational just to setting the agenda around what we mean by threat-informed defense, getting the industry aligned to that, and then starting to provide a tool to be able to measure yourself, see where you sit relative to what good looks like, benchmark yourself against your peers, which I think is something that's coming that the team are looking at, but also build a roadmap around what to do next and what of the tooling and products that are out there and are available that you can start use to build processes in your own teams and start to pick this off the shelf and run with it. So for me, it's about what do you do first and what do you do next? And that's probably the key challenge.
The roadmap, I think, is another great conversation too. And that's in the spirit of the idea marketplace and the center of what we do. That's what maybe I'm going a little off topic here, but with the center itself, that's what I love. There's so many great ideas that are spawned, and it's the art of there's so much good stuff already happening with attack and threat-informed defense. But then I think about, future applications of this too. And attack flow is a great example of that. Obviously, everyone and their dog and cat are talking about machine learning and AI, but you think about applications of that to game boarding, predictive analysis on flow charts, and there's so many things possible, which also makes it exciting too.
Yeah, I share your enthusiasm for the M3 TID project, and I'll say if you're here online, you haven't checked out M3 TID, check it out. One of the things I think is worth pointing out is when we create and publish a research project, what we do next is very much driven by you, the broader community, how much you like it, the feedback we get from you, the impact it's having. We want to be continually focused on creating impactful resources and advancing those resources to have that effect, to drive towards more efficient, more effective cyber defense. So two things. We're going to go one more question for you guys, and then I want hopefully the audience to start thinking about any questions you might have. We've got a unique opportunity here. I've built in time to the panel to have some audience questions, so get ready. So maybe just quickly in a couple minutes here, if you had one lesson learned that you'd like to share, that you wish you knew maybe as you got started, what would it be, Mark?
Right. So John, I don't think it's I'm going to reshape the question a little bit. So where we started 5-6 years ago, the center started, I think it's a very, very different landscape today. 5-6 years ago, threat-informed defense was a really new concept, and I think a lot of folks couldn't quite wrap their heads around what this actually meant from a practical execution perspective. Now that has clearly changed over the last 6 years. So for firms that are kind of, if you're embarking on the journey itself, right? In my conversations with folks outside of Citi, one of the questions is, where do I get started, right? And I think over here, the center has really published quite a lot of projects across a variety of different domains, all the way from standing up a TID initiative, all the way right down to specialized areas like insider threat. Pick something small that your organization can relate to. Find the stakeholders that have commonalities in these spaces, and just go from there, right? You don't have to consume everything at once, but just pick a project that's in existence, start there, and kind of just develop it as you go along, right? The founding members that have started that were part of the center, the new members that have joined over the years, each of these organizations have contributed quite a lot of resources, experience to all of these projects, and that would be a good start off point. Thank you.
David?
Yeah, I'll keep it short. Start using Attack. We're here for the MITRE ATT&CK Community APAC conference workshop. Start using Attack, use it in your team, use it to look at your detections, use it to think about your response preparedness, look at your controls and your mitigations, and start with that. If you can get, I think Mark talked about it before, but buy-in with your senior stakeholders, start small with Attack, try and get that buy-in, and then build from there.
So summit the pyramid of pain, right?
What he says.
Yeah, so absolutely start talking in TTPs instead of IOCs, right? So live, eat, breathe, MITRE ATT&CK for sure. Lesson learned from my point is this journey, it is a journey. I think it's not just a cookie cutter, it's not a bootstrap turnkey solution you can just go buy out of the box, right? It's not like, do you have threat-informed defense, yes or no? So it's much more of, again, there's a lot of these existing pockets and elements, and I think it's about that education where we go to. It's that's so what to the stakeholders also, like, again, I mentioned the outbreak alerts earlier, that was something we realized that, because we asked PMs to get involved with the center before, and they're like, I'm too busy. Then when you start to say, hey, this can actually help you because ... right? In this case, product resilience and all of that, then they listen, right? So it's, I think, really understanding some of that stakeholder value up front, communicating that will have that sort of snowball effect. It's like anything in cybersecurity, though, it's not going to happen right overnight. It's a journey, and you can start with different elements of it.
Yeah, I obviously completely agree. It's a journey. I love your point there, Mark. I think that the most important thing is to, and as you said too, Derek, to kind of get started. Pick something, recognize that it's an ongoing activity. You don't start and finish. You're going to continue down this path and on this journey indefinitely, because the environment we work in, the adversaries that we're defending against, are all changing and evolving with us, right? So as I said, we have a few minutes here to take a couple audience questions. All right, there we go. There's a question over there. Go ahead.
Thank you. Great panel. A lot of interesting discussion. So Derek, you just mentioned that start thinking of TTP instead of IOCs, but actually a lot of the discussion are just about T and T. How about procedure? How do we go beyond the techniques and the tactics to talk about procedures that are more granular than techniques?
Yeah, great question. I think, so when you get to that stage, again, this goes back into, from our perspective, what we've done again in our demo environments, right? Looking at how we break out. One example of what we've done is built threat actor cards. We actually modeled this after Pokemon. So we have like these threat actor capabilities, right? And like, we don't have hit points and stuff like that, but here are the, different TTPs that are associated with that. But then when it comes to implementation of the procedures, and again, in the environments we have, and like with MITRE Caldera, that's a great tool to use for that, right? When it comes into the actual breach simulation, the emulation component, that's where you can actually start the procedural level more. So it's not just a big list on paper of all the capacities. I think someone has a question. But like on the procedural level, you have to demonstrate more, I would say, right? Than just talk about it or show in a matrix. Yeah. David,
I might jump in on that as well. That's a great question, because I think we talk a lot in terms of techniques when we think about MITRE ATT&CK, but it's not until you dive down that next level to look at procedures where things become more useful, more interesting, more actionable, if you want. I kind of think about procedures as almost like the fuel for our function. So our TI team are hopefully they're watching now. They're not just looking at techniques, but also articulating procedures that we pass to our detection team to write detections. They're passing that to our mitigation team to properly understand our controls, to be able to mitigate a particular procedure. And then our adversary emulation team are doing the same thing. So I think we need a better community library. And I know you've been doing some work on that, Nicholas, on procedures at that level. And I think that's something we should be driving, because we spend a lot of time on it. And I think it's something, as you mature what you do with threat-informed defense, you need more and more of this, of that sort of data.
Go ahead. We have time for one more question here.
I have a general observation. Operations, engineering, and products. And at the user end, there is a set of procedures that people follow on a daily basis. Each one of them have a time constant, birth to death. How does one travel there seamlessly as an organization, as a CTO or a CEO?
Do you mind just rephrasing the question? I missed that.
In my perspective, there are three aspects to the security-related environment. One is operations. They have a perspective. Engineering team, they have a perspective. And then the products, the sellers, they have products. They have a perspective. And there is a problem space, seen by each one of them slightly differently. Each one of them, for change management, has a time constant and, of course, investment. If I'm the CEO or CTO, how do I take a decision? Because I'm getting three perspectives and three time constants and three time cost estimates.
So, okay, so thank you. So I understand the question. I'll take it quickly from my perspective. These are dependencies, right? So I like, if from a CEO perspective, if you think of each one as a cost and each one as a silo, that's not an effective approach, right? Like, they're dependent on each other. So if I talked about our journey again, it starts with engineering, right? Because engineering is developing implementing the projects that are coming out from the Center for Threat Informed Defense. So the resource and time initially is in engineering. Then we have UIs, we have product views, we have MITRE ATT&CK on there. Then it's up to the rest of the departments not to operate in their own bubble or silo, but to build off that engineering approach, have that. You mentioned standardization in industry. Once you have that, it acts as that force multiplier, where now sales and operations can then pick up on that messaging, right? So it's starting with one, and then it's that sort of, as we always talk about, diamond models and triangles, and it's sort of that interdependency, I would say. Yeah.
Mark, did you want to weigh in? Or?
Sure. So, it goes back to my point earlier on, trying to get stakeholder buy-in and having this common understanding as to what threats you're facing. And I'm coming from the end user space, right? So, apologies if it's you're on the vendor side, but if you look across all of these functions today, right? Everyone says we're going to need to buy a new firewall, we need to buy a new product. The question is why, right? And threat-informed defense really drives that particular thought process to answer the why are we doing this, and what is the effectiveness of doing this, right? And it's kind of getting both your operations functions, your engineering architecture functions to have that same common understanding to say, hey, if we're going to design a system or process in this manner, this is the threat that we're going to mitigate, and it needs to be a relevant threat to your organization, right? So, say for example, the threats faced by a firm in the manufacturing sector would be very different from what we face, right? It's kind of understanding the threat landscape you operate in. It's understanding what you're concerned about and having that common language when you talk about how these things are evolving in reference to your own organization. I think that would probably be my approach here.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And I think with that, we're just at time. I wanted to say thank you, Derek, David, Mark. Awesome discussion. Really appreciate you guys taking the time to be here and hosting the panel with me. I would encourage you all at our next break, reach out to them, introduce yourselves. Let's learn together and work together to advance threat-informed defense for everyone.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.